Well, Alysse, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
We're gonna have so much fun. We were just chatting about all the things that we're gonna talk about, and I was like, yeah, we're not gonna have any.
We're not going to have any problem holding a conversation. I don't think so.
No shortage of topics. So you've been in long-term sobriety. You just celebrated 16 years on May 1st. Congratulations.
Yeah, that's my sober sweet 16. I actually threw myself an 80s themed party. There's a really cool Airbnb here in the greater Seattle area, and it's called the 80s house, and it's a basement of this house, and this woman has perhaps at least the largest collection of 80s and 90s memorabilia that I've ever seen.
Wow.
And like each bedroom is themed out. There's like a Star Wars room and a Barbie room and there's a room that has New Kids on the Block sheets, and it's just got all these toys from our childhood. And so I rented it for a night and I invited a bunch of gals over. I was like, wear an outfit, don't wear an outfit. I don't care. I'll be wearing several different outfits throughout the evening. And we just had a blast. Like we just ate and drank and we just talked about all of the things that we remembered from our childhood. And it turned out collectively as a group, we all had resentments against Guess jeans because we all grew up too poor and we couldn't afford them.
Yeah.
And so we all of us had like emotional trauma around Guess jeans.
That is so funny that you say that because I also grew up poor, same resentment. And for whatever reason, I scraped up enough money to buy Guess overalls.
Ooh.
Thank you, Bananarama.
Ooh, nice.
But you can only wear those for so long because it's it's in a very identifiable, oh my God, I can't speak today. Identifiable outfit.
Yes.
So you can only wear them every so often. Had I purchased just a regular pair of jeans, I could have,
dressed them up a little different ways.
Yeah. So I could have worn them more often. So big mistake.
I remember my first, maybe my only pair of Guess jeans. They were like a turquoise seafoam green. They were in the clearance section. And I was so excited that I could fit into them because I was chubby and like their sizing at the time didn't go very large. And I remember the first dance of my junior year, I wore these seafoam green Guess jeans, and I cut them off and made them into shorts. And I just wore them with such pride, such pride.
Yes, the perils of growing up poor. It does sort of make you treasure the things that you do have.
It really does. It really does.
Well, I thought we would start. So you are the brainchild behind the Sober Curator.
Yeah.
Which is brilliant. And we'll talk a little bit about that later, how that came about. I wanted to play the little lightning round game.
I love it.
For it. So early recovery, were there any books that helped you, as you were getting sober?
It's funny that you asked that question because 16 years ago, there weren't the options that there are now, right?
Yeah.
The Barnes and Noble section, the self-help section was still like pushed way in the back and it was pretty small and it was right next to the, sex addiction section. And I was just like standing there going, this is where my life ended up. And I don't remember. There was a book that I got. It was called Beach Glass. I still have it. And it was a woman here in the Pacific Northwest. It was her memoir of sorts of going through rehab a couple different times and how she got sober. And that was the first recovery memoir I'd ever read. And there were so many pieces of her story that I identified with. So that's the one that I remember from way, way back at the beginning. And then one of my all-time favorites that I've read multiple times and have highlighted and dog-eared and whatever. I love Lisa Smith, A Girl Walks Out of a Bar. I fangirled her when I started the Sober Curator and hunted her down and you must be my friend. So I really loved the humor that she infused throughout her book. Yeah.
I got to hang out with Lisa at the She Recovers event in Miami. We shared a cab at like 4 a.m. because we both
Ooh,
had early flights the next day. She is awesome. I just
she's
love
a hoot.
her.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's a hoot.
she's just so smart in her book. She was so smart to write as she was going through her process.
Mhm,
Because looking
mhm.
back, it is kind of hard to capture those early recovery feelings and experiences
It
sometimes.
is. And I've thought about writing a book, and I look back, and first of all, I'm like, well, now everybody has one. So I don't know that I want to do that. But it would be hard to capture exactly how I was feeling, because it's been a while, and certain
Yeah.
things I definitely remember, but then other things I don't know if I would remember.
Well,
I'm not a good journaler. I don't know if you're a good journaler. I'm not, but I did journal like the first 30 days that I was in treatment. And I still have that notebook. And so
oh
I
my
go
God, that's
back and I look through it
amazing.
and I'm just like, wow, you're really a hot mess, girl.
I mean, we don't show
Yeah,
up to these rooms because things are going well.
right. We don't. We certainly do not.
Very confused. Yeah. No, it is, yeah, the idea of writing. I got sober 28 years ago and I don't remember a lot of the things, but there are certain things that I obviously do remember.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's once you've been, 16 years, it's amazing that you have that writing though. That's a good place to start. I feel like everybody's story is so valuable and you just never know how
Mhm.
your story might impact somebody else. Like yours, there is somebody out there that needs to hear your story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so important. There's a guy, I'm in a writing group, Albert Flint de Silver, if you're ever interested, has an amazing writing group
Yeah,
that
I
I'm a
would be
part of.
interested in
So
that.
yeah. Um, Always happy to throw out lots of resources.
I love resources. Keep them coming.
I know, right? You're the sober
I'm
curator.
the sober
So
curator. I need all the resources.
all the
That's the whole
resources.
point. That's the whole
That's the
point.
whole point. You're curating resources for people who want to be sober. Yes. Do you have like a go-to mantra or idea or quote that you live by?
um, Good question. I, I definitely am a one day at a time girl. Like
Yay!
to a point that like I take it a little too literally. Like if somebody asks me what I'm doing this weekend, I'm like, whoa, one day at a time.
I'll settle down.
I can't commit to that right now. So I do take it a little too literally at times. I also, when I was probably about 5 or 6 years sober, I got "Be Still" tattooed on the inside of my right
Mm,
wrist as a reminder to like be still and know that I am God. Like just be still, be quiet in the moment, like, and listen, because all the I have found that you get all the answers that you need if you sit quietly and listen for them. You may not like the answers, right? But you get them. And so that is supposed to be a reminder to me to just settle down.
I love that idea of be still because I've been reading I'm a voracious reader and I came across something that talked about the whispers.
Mm-hmm.
The ego speaks first and the ego speaks loudest. And that inner still quiet voice that, I think of it as a higher power. It's that God voice that's inside or your intuition or however you want to think about it. But it's like that inner wisdom. It's a whisper.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so hard to hear beneath the noise of distraction and
Mm-hmm.
ego. So that is
Well, and I
huge.
think, at least for me in early recovery, like I still wasn't able to be honest with myself. I'm such a liar. Like I lie to everybody. Like, and I get offended when they don't believe my lies, right? And I lie to myself. And so it's you do get the answers, but you don't always want to hear them. So it does take a while to stop lying to yourself and
Yeah.
then register with what the whispers that you're hearing and then take action accordingly. Like
Take action
that
accordingly.
doesn't happen overnight. At least it didn't for me.
It does not happen overnight, but it's so funny that what appears to be grace is when that message cuts through the clutter occasionally. And I know that it's true because it's what I don't want to hear. That's how I know that that
Mm-hmm.
is the still small voice. It's,
Mm-hmm.
like Gloria Steinem said, the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off.
Yeah. I remember, you'll appreciate this story. I was in early recovery and I was following some suggestions from another woman that was guiding me, and she said, you know, when you're in recovery communities, like, listen for the miracle. Don't leave, you know, don't leave before the miracle happens. And so I was in a church basement, and I heard someone say that phrase, you know, don't leave before the miracle happens. I was like, that is such great advice. And then I left the meeting early.
Oh, that's all I needed to hear.
Yeah. I called her and I was like, I got it. Don't leave before the miracle happens. And she was like, and then what did you hear after that? And I was like, well, nothing. I left. And she was like,
the irony.
Yeah. And I was like, oh. Yeah. A little slow on the uptake.
You're so funny. I know, but we have to go look back and laugh at ourselves, right? The things that we do in the beginning. I mean, we're just so damn confused.
So confused. So confused. I remember going into a 12-step shop. I don't even know if they have them anymore, but they had one in Seattle way back when. And I walked in and, you know, I saw all kinds of things, but I went up and I saw this like enclosed counter with all these coins, you know, that were bedazzled and whatever. And I was like, can I just buy my first year? Like, can I just buy it? And they were just like, doesn't really work like that. And I was like, this is the worst.
Like, I remember some asshole at a meeting was like, it takes 14 years to get 14 years. I was like, go away.
Yeah. Like, you're so annoying. Yeah.
So annoying. But what I didn't know was that there was value in being new. I mean, early recover is when you grow in leaps and bounds. Like when you're ready,
so much.
Man, I remember getting those revelations after revelations, and I was like, this is amazing. And then later in recovery, you're like, man, those revelations sometimes can be far apart because it takes to reach those deeper layers takes a lot of courage and work to dig deeper and get rid of those things that we took so much time to bury so deeply.
Yeah. Did you have a pink cloud experience at the beginning?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, so I was lucky that the obsession was lifted early in my recovery. It took me 60 days to get 30, but I was and it wasn't like my life wasn't without a lot of pain and drama in the beginning, but I was just so relieved to be sober. So I had the gift of desperation. So I was doing everything that they told me to do. And then when you're doing everything that when you're taking all the action, taking all the suggestions, you invoke the law of cause and effect. So because I was in so much pain and I was so desperate, that was my leverage to take all this action. And because I was taking all this action, I was feeling really good. So I don't really feel like pink cloud is a fair assessment. We throw that term around a lot. I think it speaks to the relief that we feel when you first get sober. You're like, oh, finally, I found my people. I found my place. I found my community. It's like a relief that I really feel like for me, that period was so full of action that I was invoking the law of cause and effect and reaping all the rewards. Yeah. Did you have that too?
I did. But I had a lot of ego coming in. Like when I checked into treatment, I already had 30 days sober. So I was like, I'm so far ahead of you people. Like, I'm so far ahead of you people. I've got days. And, I was really quick to, I'm good at parroting. And so like, if I hear people using certain buzzwords or certain things that people are responding well to, I can mimic that. Right. Yeah. And so I learned all the buzz phrase and learned how to get people to laugh and cry and clap for me. And like, I learned all those things that made it look like I was doing the deal. Like I put a cover on my book because only serious people like put covers on their book,
Yes,
I got a keychain, I did all those things. And I was so full of shit. Like I was just faking it because I was doing, I mean, it was the best I could at the time. Right.
Yeah,
but it was still just a lot of the behavior that I had while drinking. I just wasn't drinking. But
were you not working steps?
No, definitely not.
You were in a 12-step community, but not working steps.
Not working steps. Yeah. I went through four sponsors without ever actually, like, I would meet with them and we would read the book and I would get up to maybe step 2 or 3. And then I would be like, oh, I don't want what you have. I think I need to work with somebody else. And well, that not with my first one. My first sponsor, she relapsed. So then that set me off in finding other sponsors. But then I started picking sponsors that I have a very strong personality. I don't know if you picked up on that, but very strong personality type. And so it's that, I can just bulldoze right over people if I'm not being careful. And I did that with the first couple of sponsors that I had. I just, I picked these like quieter, shy, methodical people that I could just like right over. And it wasn't good for me. It wasn't good for them. I was just really toxic. But I got probably about 4 years in recovery. I got so miserable sober. It was actually, I felt like it was a worse bottom than when I came in.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to drink or use. I didn't want to live.
Right.
And I was like, this isn't what I got sober for. And you're right. Pain's a motivator, right? Yeah. Consequences are motivators. And so it took that to get into enough pain. And then it was really interesting. This guy called me out of the blue. We weren't phone friends, but he had my number from a meeting, and he called and he was just like, hey, the boss, just gave me a nudge that I'm supposed to check on you. So I'm just following up to see how you're doing. And I was like,
the boss meaning God.
Yep. That he refers to God as the boss. And I said, oh, it's so interesting that you called because I want to kill myself. And I actually verbalized it to someone. And then I just like, just started crying. And he was like, I think I know of a woman that I think would be really beneficial for you. Let me call and see if I can share her number. And assuming she says yes, I think you should meet with her. And so I did. I met that woman at a coffee shop, and she ended up being the sponsor that got me through all 12 steps. And I had a real experience going through that and doing it. And, I learned a lot of lessons, but one of the most important ones I learned out of the gate is I could do hard things. I didn't have to like what I was doing to get results. Right. And I'm very
guarantee you will not like it.
You will not like it.
You will not like it. Guaranteed.
I don't like going to the gym. I know some people do. I don't, right? But when I go and I use the machines or I go to the classes, guess what? It works.
You feel so better. Like cause and effect works on everyone
every single time, right?
Not personal.
So yeah, that was a real defining moment. And what's really interesting is that guy is in my life 14 years later, and starting next week, he's going to be my new boss. Whoa. So like for my day job, for like professionally, after all these years. And so you just never know. You just never know how things are going to turn out.
Yeah, I think that's the really cool thing about sort of submitting and surrendering to the process of the 12 steps is the universe wants to surprise and delight you. And when you let go of control and allow life to happen, then amazing things happen that you could never predict. But control is the shadow side of fear, right? And when we show up, we're so full of control. We want to control the entire process because we're afraid. Yes. And we don't have the experience of this new way of life because we haven't done it yet, right? Yeah. And so just not knowing what you don't know, it's like the contempt prior to investigation thing.
Oh yeah. And there were so many times that I would get so upset about not getting what I thought I wanted. But hindsight is 2020. And I look back, I'll just use some men that I dated as an example that I'm like, they're totally the one. They're the one. We're going to get married. It's going to be amazing. And I look back and I'm like, dodged a bullet. Thank you, God.
Bullet,
whoa, thank God I didn't get what I wanted, because the things that I did get were so much bigger and better and wilder than I could have ever imagined. I know people say that, but it's for reals.
Well, until you have the experience, it's hard to really understand what it means. It's like you can describe an orgasm to somebody, but until you have one,
you don't know.
You don't really know. So funny.
I like that.
I had a sponsor once who told me that God says, yes, not yet, or I have something better for you.
Mhm. Yeah.
And she and I were discussing men at that
Mm-hmm.
time. And thank God I didn't get what I wanted, because I have like the perfect husband for me now. Yeah. I actually have some more lightning round questions for
Oh,
you.
we're not very good at this lightning thing, are we?
I know. I
We're like
always say,
dragging it out as long as
no,
possible.
I always say, oh, this is more like the turtle round, but I say that every damn time. I am curious about your self-care routine. And I recently interviewed somebody who threw in this idea of an annual retreat to her self-care process. And I thought, oh, that's so interesting. I usually think of a self-care practice as, what do you do first thing in the morning? How many meetings do you go to a week? Or do you do yoga certain time? So I'm just curious about what your self-care practice looks like, whether it's daily, weekly, or annually, or whatever. What does that look like for you?
I wish I was the kind of person that was like super disciplined and did the same thing every morning, afternoon, and evening. Like I wish.
Well, listen, you're
I
doing
was that
something
person.
right. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, I wish, but
what you're actually doing is working. So that's good enough.
Yeah. So that's a big lesson there, is that you don't have to do it perfectly, and you don't have to do it all. You just have to do enough, right? You just have to be in a little bit of action. And for me, it looks like a couple different things. There's definitely a lot of prayer and meditation.
Okay.
And that can look like different things to me. You know, yeah, sometimes it means dropping down to my knees. Other times it's just while I'm walking my dogs and I'm just outside in nature, and I'm just, in my head, or even sometimes vocally verbalizing out loud, talking to myself, which, yeah, I'm that girl that walks around the neighborhood walking her dogs, talking to herself. But I also I am a very creative person, and artistic. I'm not saying I'm good at it. Like I can't make a living at it, but I love playing and being creative. And so when I'm like coloring or painting or crafting or something, like I feel like it gets me out of self, and I just get to kind of just be in the moment and be still. I also really enjoy virtual reality video games. There's a couple of really great meditation games on the Oculus.
Really?
There's also a really cool National Geographic app where you can go and like sit in all these beautiful places around the world. And so like during the pandemic, I would sit in my living room with the virtual reality glasses on, and I would turn the fan on, and I would put my flip-flops on, and I'd make myself an icy cold drink, and I pretend I was on a beach somewhere, just like little things, just little things like that. But probably the biggest thing for self-care for me is being of service to other people. Because it gets me out of self. And my parents, I grew up with parents that were always of service to other people. That's all I saw my whole life. Both my grandfathers were pastors. So on both sides of my family, I come from, I spent a lot of time in churches, between going to a private Christian school and then just being at church all the time. And so but my parents really modeled being of service to other people, and they still do. And I'm so glad to have that I have a personal example in my parents to watch. But it does that helps keep me out of self, and when I'm helping somebody else, it feeds back into me. So it is self-care, if that makes sense.
100%. No, I teach a class on self-esteem, and one of the tenets is service, because it's the fastest way to rebuild your self-esteem. And those of us who with drug addiction or alcohol addiction, our self-esteem is really low. There's a lot of guilt and shame involved in recovery, and service is where we find that we actually have something to give. And it's so interesting how when we're talking to someone else, we end up saying the exact thing that we need to hear. It's just so that's one of the surprise and delight things about recovery, is you end up saying the exact thing you need to hear. I love how you included in your self-care some things that are fun, right? Because I feel like it's so easy to turn self-care into another thing that we beat ourselves up with, right?
It doesn't have to be this massive thing on your to-do list, right? And I think that's one of the things, and it's part of my intention around the Sober Curator, but people seem to think that when we get sober, somehow we get boring or something. I am like the opposite of boring. I have a very fun and full life. I just left a job where my secondary title was literally director of fun. And so
Whoa.
like I believe wholeheartedly in playing and playing
Yeah.
hard, and so I feel like all of that is self-care just as much as I also have value in getting pedicures and manicures. And today I'm actually going to go with a sober gal friend this afternoon. We're going to go get facials and massages and
Nice.
go out to lunch. And those are things that I can afford to do now because I'm not drinking and because I'm not, making
Right.
poor choices on a regular basis. So,
Not running up
yeah,
hundreds of dollars at the bar.
exactly. I also I love sleeping. I love sleeping. I love taking naps. And I'm not gonna fall asleep in a recliner or snooze on the couch. I take a nap, I get back into my bed, I unmake the bed, I get into the bed, the blackout curtains go on, the sleeping glass goes on. I'm going down. I just love sleeping. And now that I have apps that can monitor how much I sleep and what my quality of sleep is, that sleep is a really big self-care. And then trying to get enough water. I mean, really basic things to being human,
Yeah. Yeah.
But when I do all those things, it really makes a difference.
That is really huge. I mean, we underestimate sleep and water and the real basic things, but it is important to get back to that. So much about recovery, especially in the 12-step community, is focused on a higher power or spirituality. And I think it's so important to start highlighting, spiritual experiences because we need evidence. We need to have the experiential evidence of something greater than ourselves. And I put a question to this women's recovery group that I have about, how do you talk to somebody who was like, I don't believe in a higher power? And she mentioned, she used this term sky daddy. And I just thought that
daddy
was,
in the sky. Is that
yeah,
sky
like she
daddy?
said something about a supreme being or sky daddy. And I was like, that is the funniest thing I have ever heard in the 28 years that I have been sober.
That's pretty great.
Sky daddy. Because
Sky daddy.
that doesn't, I don't resonate with, I was like you, I grew up in the church and I had an aunt who did genealogy and she discovered that we had 400 years of ministers on my daddy's side. And I was like, what those people must be thinking about me up in heaven, assuming they're there. But they must be thinking. So I kind of grew up with all that. So how did you reconcile? Did you have okay, I guess I'm asking too many questions at once, but let's start off with, can you share some spiritual experiences that you had since you've been sober?
I can. So I know that I had a lot of spiritual experiences while drinking and using because they would usually come at the end of a long bender or the end of a long night. And I would be like, I promise God, if you get me out of this situation, I'll never again. And I thought those were spiritual experiences, and they might have been, but the one I had a very significant one in early recovery. I was working at a newspaper and I was carpooling with this woman, and if we carpool together, I got free parking. I love free stuff. Okay. And so I was like, I didn't really, I didn't know if I liked her so much as a person, personality wise. Like, I don't know if I would have been besties with
But you
her.
liked her free parking.
But I like the free parking. Right. So we started commuting together and we were, we both lived in North Seattle. So it was probably 45 minutes, an hour each way. So that's some time with somebody. Right.
Yeah.
And so as we spent all this time on I-5 and I was talking about all kinds of hot mess situations I was in, she would be like, yeah, I know what that's like. And she was sober. And she was like, if you ever want to know what I did, I'm always happy to share that with you. And I never asked for months. I was like, yeah, not interested. Right.
No, thank you.
Then the day came when I was pretty broken and talking to my sister. And she was like, well, what if you call the carpool lady? Like she's been offering to help you this whole time. And I was like, yeah, okay. So I called her and she took me to my first 12-step meeting, which I hated. I hated it so much. And I was like, I'm never going to one of those again. Never. Right. this was awful. Like, these are not my people. And so then that set me off. I started going to different therapists and a couple different treatment centers doing intake, evaluations. Honestly, I was trying to find someone who would like prescribe me a pill that would allow me to drink more, or teach me how to drink normally. I wasn't trying to stop. And every place that I went, they kept recommending it treatment. They kept recommending, inpatient. So I ended up at this treatment center one day doing an evaluation. And for whatever reason that day, I told the truth. And she recommended inpatient. And I was like, I can't do that. I am a single mom. I don't get any child support. I don't have enough vacation time to go to 30. I can't be Sandra Bullock and do 28 days. I can't do it. So there's got to be another way. And she was like, well, we do have outpatients that people do usually after inpatient. But if that's all you could do, it would be 3 days a week in the evenings. And I said, you know what? That's what I'm going to do. In about a couple of weeks, my son, it'll be summer vacation. He can go stay with my parents. I'll work during the day. I'll do treatment at night. And then on the weekends, I'll see him. And this is how I'm going to make it work. And she was like, okay, well, what are you going to do between now and when the class starts to stay sober? And I was like, she's like, have you tried going to a 12-step meeting? I was like, oh yeah, no. Yeah, I tried that. No, thank you. And she's like, well, can you control your drinking? And I was like, oh, control. I don't know. I've never tried. Come on, like, really? So then she's like, well, here's the thing. If you find between now and the time you check into outpatient that you're struggling, there's actually a women's meeting here at the treatment center, and people from the outside can come in. It's on Tuesday nights. It's called Sober Gals, and you're welcome to come by anytime. So a couple weeks later, after trying to control my drinking, I ended up at this meeting, right? And I sat as close to the door as possible. I didn't make eye contact with anybody. But as I looked around, I was like, okay, well, I like her nails, and clearly she gets her hair colored. And I think I have those same Lululemon pants, right? I was identifying with people in the room. I was like, oh, okay, yeah. These kind of look like my people, right? And then as women started to share, every single woman that night shared a personal experience to them that had, to the detail, also happened to me. And I was so overwhelmed. In fact, there was one case I was like, are we sleeping with the same guy? Is that possible? But I mean, it was just really overwhelming. All these different things that these women were sharing. And I was like, me too. And when the meeting was over, I couldn't get out of there fast enough, because I could feel, I've always felt the presence of God since I was a little girl. Like, I have, and I could feel it bubbling up, and it was very overwhelming. And I was like, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. And I like ran to my car, didn't put my chair away, just couldn't get out. Didn't want to talk to anyone, couldn't get out of there fast enough. And I was driving home, and I just started sobbing, and I was so mad at God. And I was just like, you know what? Really, you're going to take away my booze? It's the only thing I have left. I'm single, I'm chubby, I'm a single mom, I live paycheck to paycheck, I don't own a house, like my finances are in a disaster. And like, I was just all these things that are not right with me. And like, now you're going to take away my vodka. Like, I hate you. And why are you doing this to me? And if this is really it, I'm demanding in my car, if this is really it, just give me one more sign. And literally, as I screamed out loud to God as I was driving down the road, give me one more sign, this ding goes off in my car. And I look down in the dash, and it says, perform service. And I was like, God is in my dash, right? And I was just, this was real. Like, I was demanding a sign, and I got one, perform service. And I had to pull over to the side of the road, because this was like way too much for me. And then I just started like, the kind of ugly crying when you're also laughing. Yes, and I was just like, okay. I mean, my higher power is funny, right? He's got a sense of humor, and he's like, oh, okay, bitch, you want a sign? I'm gonna give you one. I'm gonna give you two right inside your dash. Perform service. And I was sitting there, and I was just like, what more do you want, Alysse? You just demanded a sign. He gave it to you. Now what? You got another challenge? Like, how long are you going to keep doing this? And as I sat there, the perform service went away, And it came back and my gas tank showed a little bit below a quarter of a tank. And what I heard in that moment is if somebody was sitting in the passenger seat, seriously, like a real voice, I heard, "You can do this now. If you don't, the next time I come for you, you will be on empty." And I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm done. I'm done, because I can't get more broken than this. I don't, if more broken than this is possible, I don't want to know what that is, because I'm crawling out of my skin right now. And, by the grace of God, I haven't had a drink since that night. Not because I didn't want to, right? But like at that point, that was the moment that I just fully surrendered on the side of the road in my car. And yes, I know that perform service, I really needed an oil change. That's what was happening with the car. But I still believe that God was in that dash. And I didn't realize how funny perform service would be until I've gotten a lot of mileage out of the story. I will say,
I'm sure.
I've told it many times in 16 years. It's the only one I have, right? Like, and
it was the only one you needed.
And it's the only one I needed. And what happened after that night is I was done questioning and I just did everything. So I checked into treatment, and they told me to go to 90 meetings in 90 days. Did it. They told me to get a sponsor. Did it. They told me to get a service position. Did it. Get a book. Got it. Put a book cover on it. Did it. Like, go through the 3 months of outpatient. Done. Like, I was like, I'm not going to question anything. I'm just going to do it. Right. But then, like I mentioned kind of at the beginning of this conversation, I got in there and I got a little too comfortable, right? And I got a little too funny and a little too full of myself. And I learned all the buzzwords, and I started performing recovery. I wasn't living recovery. I was just performing what I was seeing. I was mimicking what I was seeing,
right,
which got me pretty far, quite honestly. A couple
Did you
years.
Say 4 years?
4 years. Yeah.
That's
4
a long
years.
Time.
That got me. But I was really a dry drunk, because I was still doing all the same behavior. I was still lying, cheating, stealing, sleeping around, all the behaviors that didn't make me feel good. I was still doing, I just wasn't drinking or using. And so, but that one experience in my car, I've never, if there's ever been a question that there's a higher power, I don't have that question. That question's been,
that was resolved for you.
Resolved for me. And God meets us, I believe, where we're at. We have to show up halfway, or just even a little bit of the way, right?
Just a chink in the armor.
Just a little bit.
Armor. Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's so important to, hear these stories. Hope is hearing other people's experiences, right? And just being able to relate a little bit. And that's when we're just willing to reconsider some of the information that we already have, to include maybe new context and perspective. It could change the entire trajectory of your life. It's just amazing.
Just learning about your blind spots, right? You don't know what you don't know. But once you learn your blind spots, you become a better driver, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you become more aware of the elements that are going to come at you no matter what. Sober or drunk, the life is going to happen, right?
Absolutely.
So what kind of tools do you have, to move forward? And that's looked like a lot of different things for me over the years.
Tell me about some of the tools. So obviously 12 steps were a big tool for you, and you are the Sober Curator. So that's a website resource that people can check out. I love your whole theme about that. And I was going to ask you, you mentioned, you just briefly sort of touched on the intention around Sober Curator. Can you share a little bit about what your intention was for Sober Curator and what the contents of the website is?
Yeah, my background, I've been in media for over 25 years. And after I got sober, I left the newspaper business and I went to go work for a large lifestyle city magazine in Seattle. And within a couple of years, I ended up running that magazine as the publisher. And I love lifestyle content. I love pop culture. Obviously, I've already talked about 80s and 90s. Like I'm here for all of that. And over the years, as I've watched recovery out loud has really come into its own since I got sober. It is night and day different from when I got sober to what is available now. First of all, 100%. Social media didn't exist. I know now I sound old. Like, yes, I was born before the internet. Yes, I was, right? So, but like social media wasn't around. Thank God, because I was a drunk dialer. So I would have been a drunk poster, right? Yeah. So, you know, there weren't that many books out there. There weren't podcasts. There weren't, you know, what we saw in movies was 28 Days and When a Man Loves a Woman, right? We saw everything was very stereotypical and
Leaving Las Vegas.
And you didn't see like people having fun and people were treating me differently when I wasn't drinking, and so much of my industry business happens over drinks. And so as time went on, you know, I fancied myself that I was going to write a book about my story, but then I was like, I mean, I don't know, is my story that interesting? I'm not sure. But over time, and especially once the pandemic hit, I had been playing around with this idea. For me, I kept looking for a lifestyle magazine that spoke to me, a woman in my 40s in long-term recovery. I wanted someone to tell me, where do I find the best podcasts, the best new books, the best place to take a sober retreat? You know, where can I find the cute t-shirts and hats, not the really ugly stuff?
Oh my God, what is it with all the ugly crap?
Why? What? We got sober doesn't mean we can't have style. Come on, people. Like, so I was looking for that, and there are a couple of like sober magazines that are out there in the world, but they're so focused on early recovery and getting people sober. And I'm like, that's not what I want. I want something for people that have already chosen it as a lifestyle and they're looking to have some fun with it. Like they're looking, like, I love watching documentaries and movies that have addiction and mental illness woven into it as part of the storyline. I want to talk about those things, and more and more and more and more it's coming online. And so I just wanted a place for it all to like hub. And so when the pandemic hit, I was like, well, I'm just crazy enough to do this myself. And so that's how it started. But I knew that it couldn't just be me, right? It can't just be what I think is good, because I only have one very specific perspective on life, right? Mm-hmm. That is formed based off of the surroundings that I grew up in. And I wanted to make sure that when people land there, that there's something for everyone. And so I knew I was going to need a lot of curators to contribute content so that we can make this place that is for fun and for free, just a great resource of feel good. And not everything has to be about the depressing, oh, I almost died stories. Yeah, I know. We all got them. You said it first. We didn't get here on a winning streak, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm winning now, and I love talking about it. I'm so winning, you know? Yeah. So that's really the intention behind it. And although I know people that are sober curious land on the site, it's really the intent is for people that have already chosen this as a lifestyle. I'm not trying to convince anybody that they need to get sober. It's for people that have already figured that out on their own.
Yeah, that's so good. That's such a good point. And a lot of the content that you see in social media, the Instagram sober accounts are very much very much directed towards early recovery.
I was out loud, wasn't it? I
felt that to my soul, because
there's some weird stuff happening.
There's some weird shit out
there. Some weird stuff happening in sober Instagram and sober TikTok and sober Twitter.
Yeah, there really is. And do you find how are we on time, by the way?
I got all the time in the world.
Yeah. Oh, thank God, because this is going to be a minute. Because, and I think you feel my pain, we're sort of one foot in old timer or long timer program, 12-step program, and 1 foot in current day. Mm-hmm. And you know, you and I both have a lot of religious brainwashing training, however you want to, we've been indoctrinated, right? Yep. I get that. I have awareness that I have this, and I'm all about the subconscious mind and hypnosis and how do we change our thinking and what are our subconscious beliefs, you know? So I have an awareness that there's part of me that has been completely indoctrinated into the 12-step program. And then once I started doing the podcast 6 years ago, I became aware of the broader recovery community, which some of the ideas at first were very threatening and scary to me because I was so identified with 12-step. And I'm just wondering if you've had this experience where at first blush, when you see some of the social media content that is being produced, do you also have that conflicted response where it's like, I'm not sure that this is good or right or okay? And at the same time, because I feel like the longer we're sober, the less it's like the longer I'm sober, the less I know what's good for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Like everyone has to go through their process. I don't know where you are in your journey. Everybody has a bunch of variables that are all different. So I don't, but I see some things in the like Instagram sobriety community where I'm like, holy hell, this is scary to me, because it's like like these beautiful curated accounts from women who have no training, no certification, no long-term experience, who really haven't done the work, are just like sober cheerleaders or whatever, but they're positioning themselves as experts. And I find it encouraging in a way and alarming at the same time.
Yeah.
Because they're almost like the Pied Piper leading all these women down a path that we don't know how it's going to pan out. And you and I have personally seen people crash and burn and take a bunch of people with them.
Well, and I love their enthusiasm, right? Yes. I love the enthusiasm. And I look back and I think about myself in early recovery, and I also was enthusiastic about being newly sober. Yeah. And I'm sure that I talked as if I had learned all these things, right? But I look back and I'm like, I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
And I think what makes me the most nervous about it is, for many, many people, this thing is like life or death. This isn't just like a social club that you're joining, that you can, oopsies, I changed my mind. Like it's, and so when I see an account, I'll just make one up. I see an account that has, 40,000 people following it. And it's a gal who's, I don't know, maybe 25, and she's got 6 months sober, and she's offering coaching services. And then, then she's like, oopsies, I had a drink last night, just a little slip, but that I don't need to recount my days, because this is like about the journey, not about, and all these like different.
I'm not going to buy into this. I'm not going to buy into the shame.
All of that, I'm just like, well, this is really dangerous, because first that advice might be okay for some people, but for other people, like, this is life or death. And so it makes me nervous. It makes me really nervous. And I'm like, and also like, you don't have any training. You don't have, what is it that they think that they're giving away? But then I also think, is it all for the greater good? Is that, if we're raising the vibration, if more and more and more people are talking about recovery, and it's becoming more acceptable, that's not a bad thing. Right. Yeah. So I get conflicted, because there are 50 shades of recovery now. And I don't know how to split myself between old recovery and new recovery, because they're like two different worlds. And quite honestly, you know this, I know this, a lot of people don't get 15 years, 20 years, 28 years. Why? Because it's hard. Yeah. It's really hard. And so, I don't know. I guess we'll see in a few years how some of these things pan out, but it just makes me nervous. And then the flip side of that is, like, when I see these other things show up in my Instagram feeds, like microdosing or all these different opportunities for treatment, I'm like, maybe that's a good idea for
Girl,
me.
I gotta tell you, the whole psilocybin to treat, NYU is doing clinical trials using psilocybin to treat alcoholism.
Yeah.
And I think it's really fascinating. And I think the whole psychedelic, like the MAPS organization, I can't remember what it stands for now, but even in the big book, it says we only know about a little.
Right. And the big book was, published in the late 30s, right?
1930.
And science has still not cured alcoholism. We can't pee on a stick and test positive for alcoholism, right? That doesn't happen. And we can't, there's not like a shot or a pill we can take and drink normally. If there is, I have yet to discover it. And at this point, if I did, the fact that I'm even still entertaining that, alcohol did nothing for me. It did nothing for me. It gave me the illusion that I was glamorous and funnier and whatever, but I never drank like a lady, not from day one. I just didn't
either.
Girl, just didn't.
My first drink, sadly, was before I was 10 years old and I puked everywhere, and it was
classy.
Yeah, keeping it classy.
I mean, I grew up on Mad Dog and Boone's Farm, so
that is.
Yeah, well, it's disgusting. Is what
it's disgusting. It's alcohol. Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah. So I think there's room for everyone. And I think, so I sorted it out between peers, sober peers, and sober mentors. And I think if we ask people to be mindful of being able to recognize a peer versus a mentor, and I would argue that a mentor is somebody who's done all the work and has had some experience and a degree of humility. I mean, I never thought that. I think one of the reasons why I stayed sober so long is because I never thought I was above a relapse.
No,
like I have to be hyper vigilant because my knee jerk is to default. That default mode network. Your brain's operating system is, what can I do to change the way I feel? Right. Yeah. So having to be very, and then the other thing too is in long-term recovery, I remember when I first got sober, they said, if you stay sober long enough, you'll go to a lot of funerals. That has absolutely been my experience.
It is. Yes. And so that's sad. The other thing is I've seen a lot of people go out, and guess what? They don't go out and start over at the beginning. They go out and it's worse than when they stopped the last time, because it's a progressive disease.
Or you know what's even more insidious is that it's okay the first 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, because it's cunning, it's baffling, it's powerful.
Yeah, like I've seen people who are like, oh, I mindfully took a drink and decided that, you know what, I was too young when I was maybe just in a bad place, I was unhealthy, but I've done all this work, and so now I can drink mindfully. And the first couple times it's okay, and then it escalates quickly. But in that period, they've lost the ability to choose, and the addiction kicks back in.
Yeah, because they can't tell the difference between the true and the false, right? It's back. It goes back to being honest with yourself.
Yeah.
I can remember that I mentored a woman for several years, and then she ended up working for me. So I was like, okay, I can't be your mentor anymore because technically I'm your boss's boss. So you should go and start working with someone else. And she did. And then over time, she came into me one day and she's like, I've decided that I'm going to start drinking again. And, I just think that I was young and I hadn't matured enough yet, and blah, blah, blah. And granted, she got sober at 21. So I was like, yeah, you were young. I was not even close to being done at that age. But and she told me she was going to go back out. And I was just like, and I knew like all the intimate details of her life. And I was like, well, this is not a good idea. But I couldn't tell her that. Right. I was like, okay, no problem. Still here, still love you no matter what. And, for about 6 months, it seemed like she was fine. And then I got resentful, and I was just like, well, if she's fine, then maybe I would be fine. I don't know, but she wasn't fine. She was just hiding it.
Yeah.
And, and that day came where she called me in and she's like, my life was a disaster. I need help again, And I've just seen that too many times. And you're right. I've been to too many funerals.
Yeah.
And
for some of us, this is life or death.
It really is. It really is.
I remember this guy telling me, he goes, I didn't go to jail every time I drank, but every time I went to jail, I had been drinking.
Ooh, yeah.
And it seems like I didn't always get into a fight with my friends or family members or whatever. But when I did, it was because I had been drinking. Yeah, almost every time. So that gets crazy.
I didn't always have one night stands, but when I did, I was never sober. I never had a sober one night stand. I can tell you that. Nope. Nope.
Oh, the good old days. Oh, so fun.
Oh,
I used to be like waking up the next morning being like, oh my God, that's not my ceiling. Like, fuck.
I
Here we
can
go.
remember. I mean, I remember like waking up going, I don't know where I am. And there's somebody in the bathroom, and I like digging through his pants to pull out his wallet so I can figure out what his name is. Right? Like, that's not a proud moment right there. I'm not proud of that moment. And Mom, if you're listening, I'm so sorry. I forget that sometimes my mom will listen to the podcast that I go on, and then I forget what I'm talking about. And she was like, you never told me that. And I'm like, oh, so sorry, Mom.
Well, it's good to just break it off little pieces at a time.
Yeah.
I was lucky that my mother never listened to my podcast or heard me share. One time she had asked me if she's like, oh, let me know if it's okay. Let me know when you're speaking at a meeting next, then I'll come. And I was like, okay. And then I never invited her.
My mom came once. And you know, what's funny is when I was little, my mom told me, she's like, you've been given a gift. You've been given the gift of when you speak, people listen, that you have this magnetic personality, and you need to take that power really seriously, because you can use it for good, but you can also use it for evil. And, I foresee that you're going to have a future in public speaking. This is when I was like 10, 11, 12.
Wow.
Now, I don't think that she was aiming for church basement speaking, right? Like, I don't think
you're
that
still in a church,
but I'm still in a church and I'm still speaking, Mom. So
listen, Jesus loves a sinner.
Jesus
loves a sinner. He hung out with the prostitutes and tax collectors.
That's right.
He just knew who the fun people were.
Exactly. That's where all the fun happens.
He's like, I'm going there to save these people. Really, he just was looking for a good time.
Oh, yep.
I think I'm bordering on blasphemy, so I'll just steer you away from that. Listen, I could talk to you forever, and we really didn't get to your story. Maybe you can just tell me a little bit about how old were you when you started drinking and using? Because if you were growing up in the church, that had to, like, what was going on in your life that you felt
I did not drink or use anything until the age of 16. I was pretty sheltered. So late. I was a late bloomer. I went to a private Christian school until high school. So I wasn't even allowed to go to rated R movies. I wasn't allowed to have a Barbie, like we didn't go to dances, no Barbies, which is why I have Barbies now, because I wasn't allowed to have Barbies then. But so I was 16 when I started, and I was 30 when I stopped.
Okay. 16 to 30. That's a good stretch.
So now I'm like, wow, I've actually been sober for longer than I drank.
Which
is like, it feels like a tipping point. Like, oh, now what's like, this feels like now we're like into whole new territory. Because the first 16 years of my life don't count being sober, because I was a kid.
Because you're just a
like
child.
It's kind of expected that you're sober, So but I sure packed it in those years that I did.
Yeah. And did you have like a bottom, or like we talked a little bit about your moment of clarity, but I mean, did you follow the typical fun with problems than just problems?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
And there were a lot of really, when I think about the last weekend that I drank, well, first of all, if I had known that was going to be my last weekend, I would have done a much better job. Just for the record, I would have done it different. But yeah, it's not that something major happened. I just was broken enough, but really bad things happened on and off the whole drinking career. And really hard things have happened in recovery, but I haven't had to drink over it. I had emergency heart surgery at the age of 40. I had cancer 3 years ago.
Oh my God.
My son has Crohn's disease. So I've had big life things happen in recovery, and I've still been able to move through them without picking up or using, dealing with depression in recovery. That eventually resulted that I did have to get outside help, and which was really hard, because I was told that the 12 steps will do everything for you that you need them to do. Right. And as it turned out, I needed a little extra. I need extra things to keep myself in a place of healthy neutrality.
Mental health. Yeah. 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 No, that's one of sort of my pet peeves about some of the people who participate in 12 steps is they think that that's the only way and that's all you
Yeah.
need. And,
Yeah.
but it's like, why would you go to a buffet and only eat 3 things or 12?
Right.
Would
Right.
you know what I'm saying? It's like mental health. Like I remember going for a walk with this guy and he was telling me, he's like, there's like 40 different modalities of healing and 12 steps is only rated like 27 or something. I forgot what he said. I was so offended. But truth of the matter is that even early in my recovery, I love the 12 steps. I found it to be a very transformational process. And I was able to um incorporate all the ideas. Like I didn't get hung up on a lot of the things that some people that you hear about, right? People are like, oh, Sky Daddy or Supreme Being can't do it, I'm not going to go to AA. They throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Like I didn't have any of that stuff. But early on, I was introduced to the Course in Miracles, to cognitive behavioral therapy, process therapy, EMDR. Like even in the book, it talks about alcohol is but a symptom. And so did you resonate with the idea that you had symptoms that needed the underlying causes? What were some of those things?
Absolutely. And
did you have like childhood trauma or?
I'm not sure. My sister and I debate this a lot. My sister is actually a licensed addiction counselor.
Okay.
I like to take credit for her career choice.
Seems fair.
So no, I mean, I grew up in a really great household, but I don't have a lot of memories before 12.
Ooh,
So I don't
sign.
know. Yeah, there's probably something that I blocked out that I have yet to untap.
Uncover. Yeah.
But there was a lot of sexual trauma after the age of 16. And it was always, I mean, here's the thing. When you put yourself in questionable places around questionable people, questionable things happen, right?
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
I had to look at not the victim role, but my part is I put myself in those places. And so my first responsibility was to stop putting myself in those places, right?
Right.
I'm not saying that what happened to me, I deserved any of it. Of course I did not, but it likely would not have happened as much if I hadn't put myself around those people in those places.
I really appreciate your mindset around not being a victim, because I think it's so, like, I read somewhere that victims don't recover. Like you can be victimized, but not live in the victim mentality. I know that's going to piss some people off, but what I'm really trying to say is that there is a way to reclaim your power and take responsibility. Like it's not your fault, but it is your experience is your responsibility. Don't you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, and with some of the sexual trauma I had early on, it then, and combined with my very religious upbringing, where I was taught abstinence only. So then once that was out the door, then it was like, well, I guess it's on like Donkey Kong. I guess it doesn't matter what I do now. Right.
But you know what? There's something about that. I had that same experience. Sorry to interrupt you, but I had that same experience where I grew up very religious and with all those ideas. And then once you're kind of ruined, it's like, well, oh, well, I guess I'm already ruined. Like I decided at some point, like I wanted God to fix me. I wanted to be good. But then once I realized I couldn't be good, then I was going to be good at being bad.
Yeah.
And it was, like you said, it was so, it was permissive.
And then it also, like, somewhere along the way, my picker got broken, right? Because I didn't think I deserved anybody better than the jerks that I was putting, I thought this is as good as I deserve because I'm soiled, because I'm not pure, because I'm all these terrible things that I thought I had done. I lived in that victim mentality, and guess what? It didn't serve me. It didn't serve me at all.
I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but at some point we don't know that we have a choice.
Yeah. We lost the choice.
Yeah.
We lost the choice to drink. We also lost a lot of other choices. And so in recovery, like being in a relationship has been like my Achilles heel, because, my natural picker, I still gravitate towards people that don't treat me the way that I deserve to be treated. So then for a long time, I've just been like, I'll just be single then. And I'll just tell everyone I'm super focused on my career and I don't have time for a relationship, right? I'm a single
Right.
mom. I'm a busy career person. I don't have time. It's not that important. I'm independent, I'm a feminist, all these things. And really my heart desires to be in a committed partnership and relationship with someone. And it's only now 16 years later where I'm like, oh, hey, I like someone right now that's a really good guy, right? Really good guy. And whether he's the one or not doesn't actually matter. What's the progress is I'm finally attracted to someone that's treating me like I deserve to be treated. So whether it's him or this is just another practice run, it doesn't matter because I've done so much work that I'm now attracting a better quality person because I've put in the work on myself and forgiven myself for so many things.
Yeah,
right?
That's it.
Yeah.
There's this idea that, water seeks its own level, and whatever we have on the outside is a reflection of what we believe we deserve on the inside. Like and so many of us have all this guilt and shame that came out of the addiction that we don't believe we deserve any better. And that those are all limiting subconscious beliefs. And so I firmly believe that doing the work changes that. And that's why service is so important because it raises our level of self-esteem. And anytime I get a woman in front of me who is complaining about how horrible her boyfriend or husband or partner is, I never address the partner's behavior. I go, okay, let's work on your self-esteem because there's something about you that attracted that and believes that you deserve that. Otherwise, you would have said at the first sign, at the first red flag, you would have said, oh, I'm sorry, this is not for me.
Right.
Next. But there is something about it's all happening subconscious, which I think which is why we need each other, right? We need people in our lives who can say, hey, have you thought about this? Or how are you taking care of yourself? Do you love yourself? Are you doing those practices to raise the level of your self-esteem? Right. And then so that you can attract from that level.
And that I love that you say that because there's a lot of different things that help contribute to long-term recovery, but having a strong community around you is like definitely in the top 3, right? Like behind a higher power. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, I'm going through a lot of transitions in my life. I've just recently quit my job. I've just bought a house. My dad had open heart surgery. I had a kidney stone, all these things, like a bunch of things happen at once. And I got to a really dark place really fast. And thankfully, I have women in my life in long-term recovery that have more years than me that could be like, you need a time out. You need a reset. You have PTO for a reason. Take the next week off, go to a meeting every day, meditate every day, drink water, and take naps. Don't do anything else because you need a reset. And it's like, it takes people in our life that can call us out on these things. And I wouldn't be who I am today without the people in recovery that circle me and support holding me up when I can't hold myself up.
Yeah, because oftentimes we don't even recognize that we're in the middle of a storm.
Right.
It's like we're in crisis mode, so we shut down, so we don't even feel it.
Right.
So it's nice to have people on the outside being like, hey, are you okay? You don't look okay.
Yeah.
What's going on with you? So it's nice to, community, higher power, service, all those self-care, super important. Yeah. Well, listen, thank you so much you've been so generous with your time. And I love the work that you're doing with the Sober Curator. And gosh, maybe we might have to do a round 2 at some point.
Yeah. Have me back. I love it. We clearly have lots of things we can talk about.
I know. I was like, oh, so sad. We're not going to have anything to talk about. So funny. If people want to reach out to you, what's the best way to reach you?
You can reach out through the sobercurator.com. And we have an email, thesobercurator@gmail.com. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Pinterest, YouTube. We're in all the places. I'm not saying we're doing well in all of those places, but we're in all those places. And so it's pretty easy. It's pretty easy to get a hold of one of us. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, listen, I just am so grateful for all the resources that you provide and all the work that you're doing. You're doing tremendous work with your life. And I just want to personally thank you, and so excited to see what you have coming up in the future.
Oh, thanks so much.
We'll talk soon.
Okay.